Hello and welcome to my presentation on the First World War poster captioned "Daddy, what did you do in the Great War?" The source is a British recruitment poster created by the illustrator Savile Lumley in 1915. The poster is one of over 140 commissioned and produced by the Parliamentary Recruitment Committee in the first 2 years of the war, prior to the introduction of conscription in January 1916. The Parliamentary Recruitment Committee, or PRC, was an organisation established to centralise the previously local level and thus disparate recruitment efforts. The organisation printed and distributed approximately 12 million posters, 34 million leaflets and 5.5 million pamphlets by May 1916. Military setbacks in 1914 and 15 meant that the British Army desperately needed more men to both expand the force and to replace its losses. Since Britain relied upon volunteer recruits at this moment in time, the posters were part of a wider public campaign that harnessed the skills of artists and advertisers to carefully target the sensibilities of young Edwardian men with a variety of manipulative strategies. In the illustration, a father sits at home in an armchair with his children, years after the war. His son, by playing with toy soldiers on the floor, is demonstrating the widespread veneration of military men common in Imperial Britain. In contrast, his daughter, rather more passively, is reading a book while sitting on his lap. The otherwise homely image is, however, spoilt by the expression on the father's face, in response to the question posed at the bottom of the image. "Daddy, what did you do in the Great War?" The father looks troubled, perhaps even ashamed, in response to this question. He is frowning and has his left arm raised towards his chin, as if he is deep in thought, struggling for an acceptable explanation. The image draws upon the importance of the home that had been established in the Victorian period, but remained a strong feature of Edwardian culture. A happy household was, according to the standards of the time, a patriarchal one. Nevertheless, the home itself was largely understood as a feminine environment. A man's place, in times of peace, should be outside fulfilling his duty as the breadwinner of the household, and in times of war, he must again be away from the home, protecting it and his family within it, but also, significantly, his country. Therefore, in answering his daughter, he is having to face the shame of having not defended his home, and in answering to his son, he is having to face the embarrassment of having not provided a good example to the next generation of British men, who might one day be called upon to defend the realm. Voluntary recruitment had slowed in 1915, and yet demand for men was continuously increasing. Therefore, our image represents an intensification of the PRC recruitment campaign. In 1914, the posters tended to target largely positive emotions by highlighting the glory and honour of putting on a uniform and defending one's country and values. However, this poster reveals that the PRC, given the urgency of the situation, turned to the stimulation of more negative emotions. The poster shows that the PRC believed that patriotism and heroism had run out of steam as a recruitment motive, and that, therefore, guilt and shame were now better angles to target those who had hitherto proven themselves reluctant to step forward. It is important to note that our poster would not have been viewed in a vacuum. Those eligible men who would have cast their eyes upon it would undoubtedly have been exposed to other recruitment posters, especially those of the earlier, more positive kind, and thus the father within our image should be understood as the inversion of the archetypal British volunteer soldier, who, as the Remember Belgium poster displayed on the left neatly depicts, is strong, courageous, and attractive. It is especially notable within this image that a woman and a child are walking towards the soldier, and that the child reaches out his hand towards him. The British soldier, even when abroad, is attempting to stop the enemy's destruction of homes, of which women and children are symbolic. When seen with this and other similar images in mind, it is easier to understand how emasculated the man at home in his armchair would have seemed to the young men of 1915. The poster holds several significances for historians, particularly those interested, as I am, in the question of gender and masculinity. Firstly, the image tells us, in contrast to the arguments of some historians, that patriotic war enthusiasm, after an initial surge, was not enough of a force to fill the British army with adequate numbers of men. Secondly, by providing us with an antithesis to the ideal man, we can learn not just what Edwardian society circa 1915 condemned, but we can also deduce what characteristics it valued. For example, militarism, courage, and patriarchal duty. Thirdly, the war was to prove a catalyst for the feminist movement. The loss of so many men to the army meant that women, for the first time, were encouraged to enter the workplace en masse, and would, of course, secure partial suffrage shortly after the conflict. The source therefore offers a useful benchmark of the rigid gender roles of the time prior to these momentous developments. And lastly, the poster can be useful for adding important context to the words of men who fought in the conflict. Captain Charles Carrington, for example, spoke about how the trenches were fundamentally a man's world. However, the poster allows us to understand that these sentiments were far from organic, nor simply an observation of the physical environment. The source helps us to locate the influence of Edwardian gender ideology within primary accounts, and thus get closer to the true voices of the past. Thank you for listening.